Sometimes it just doesn't work. What we work on and what we deal with and what we teach, it just doesn't work.
That's true.
In fact, things go from bad to worse, they say, even though it's a very sing-song, platitude-filled life we live where everything is 30% off, and if you want it, you can get it. Some days it seems that they're just bad and looking like they'll be worse off in the morning. Even your horse starts off a winner, but it dies in the bum. So what do we do then? Failures seem to haunt us. When Jim Burke became the head of a new products division at Johnson & Johnson, one of the first products he made was the development of a children's chest rub. The product failed miserably, and Burke expected that he would be fired. When he was called in to see the chairman of the board, however, he met a surprising reception. "Are you the one who just cost us all that money?" asked Robert Wood Johnson. Yes, sir. "Well, I just want to congratulate you. If you're making mistakes, that means you're taking risks, and we won't grow unless you take risks." Some years later, when Burke himself became chairman of Johnson & Johnson, he continued to spread that word. That's from Reader's Digest in October 1991. Theodore Roosevelt, the President of the United States at the turn of the 20th century, said this, quote, "The only man who never makes a mistake is the man who never does anything," end quote.
Yeah.
Thomas Edison spent more than $100,000 to obtain 6,000 different fiber specimens, and only 3 of them proved satisfactory. Each failure brought him that much closer to the solution to his problem. His friend Henry Ford was right when he said that failure was the opportunity to begin again more intelligently. So it's said, he who never makes a mistake never makes anything. But we're not talking about personal failure here, or even the risk of such. We're moving into a dangerous realm of blame and accusation in this text in Exodus chapter 5. No one knew that kind of bad to worse day better than Moses, our unwilling hero of this ancient story named Exodus we're reading lately. Moses goes to Pharaoh like he was told in the last couple chapters. He delivers the message with his brother Aaron in tow. He says, "We need the weekend off for a prayer meeting out in the wilderness. We'll be back on Tuesday." But what Moses expected was a 3-day pass, and please report back to duty at 0800. What he got, though, was shocking. Pharaoh declined his request, and he made things even worse. Work was intensified, pain was increased, complaints arose out of the Jewish camp. And as today's stories end, Moses has a prayer meeting with the Almighty and has this to say, "Oh, Lord, why hast thou brought harm to this people? Why didst thou ever send me? Ever since I came to Pharaoh to speak in thy name, he's done harm to this people, and thou hast not delivered thy people at all." So let's read Exodus chapter 5. Moses' complaint is, well, just that, a fairly loud complaint. He says in no uncertain terms that this deliverance ministry is not working out. He says that the people are complaining and that the Egyptians don't want any part of it either. We'll get to the aching heart of Moses a bit later, but listen to his 4 complaints. Number 1, God, you are responsible for the harm of the Jewish people. Number 2, you failed by choosing me to deliver them. Number 3, Pharaoh has made it worse since you involved me. And number 4, you failed in delivering them. Oh, right, that was already number 2. All right, have you read the book of Job? These indictments of the Lord seem like quotes from the friends of Job. God, you're bad, or your man is bad, or well, things are going from bad to worse. Into that situation, God will answer in next week's episode. He'll remind Moses to look now at what God will do. The answer's not far off. For us, it's just a week away. For Moses, it was almost immediate. But was it immediate? If it were, then he wouldn't be fetching. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had that prayer meeting. See, we just don't understand the timing of the Lord's deliverance. Look at verse 1. Moses and Aaron approached Pharaoh. They had access. Now that's amazing. Isn't that amazing? Could you just walk up to Parliament House in Canberra and go in and say, hello, Mr. Abbott, I have some opinions? In fact, I'd like you to allow something to happen. I mean, we have no access. So it begs the question, how did Moses, how did Aaron, how did they have, they're 80-year-old guys. What do we know about Moses' history? He was the Prince of Egypt. I saw the movie with the cartoon. It's true. And it's likely that the Pharaoh who is Pharaoh, meaning king or government main man, president, is not the same Pharaoh who was Pharaoh 4 decades ago. According to the Ten Commandments, it was the son, the brother that he grew up with, Ramses II. That's our story. And history seems to bear that out, that he would have been Yul Brynner to Moses' Charlton Heston, right? so isn't it good we have Hollywood to inform us so we don't even need to read our Bibles? Sarcasm alert. Whatever it was, here it is, Moses using his government pass that he had from 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years, 70. So he had for 4 decades entree in the palace. The guard might have known him. The Secret Service might have known him. The KGB official who was running that side of the wing of the West Wing or the North Wing, whoever it was, he was a known man. And that allowed him first entree. After that, he's on his own. He asked for this, Shalach et ami. Now, we read that as let my people go. Yeah. Shalach, though, like an emissary is one who is sent. A shaliach, shalach manos, which we're going to do for Purim, shalach manot, the sending of gifts. Shalach et ami doesn't to me say, let my people go, but rather send my people out. And that changes it radically to me. Here is Moses identifying with the Jewish people and asking for a removaling. Shalach is sending, not allow, not let us go, which is kind of generous and passive voice. But I want you to send out my people. And so there is almost an order. Pharaoh is being told, you have the power to send people here and there. In fact, you do that for a living. So he's saying, keep doing it. Send this group of people, the Israelites, verse 1, verse 3, the Hebrews, out to the wilderness. Okay? Look at Hebrews chapter 11 in the Bible, and it's verse 24 and following. This is the zoom lens on what's happening at this very moment. Moses is making a choice to identify with the Jewish people rather than with the Egyptians. Now, he did it 40 years ago on his 40th birthday. Now here he is on his 80th and in his first year, in his 80th year. It says, verse 24, when he'd grown up, he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. I think that's when he's 80. I think it's now, not when he killed the Egyptian, but when he chose to say, Shalach et ami, send out my people. And look what it says, verse 25, choosing rather to endure ill treatment with the people of God, rather than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. So what is the writer of Hebrews saying is the opposite of mistreatment? That is, he's going to be choosing ill treatment with God's people rather than what? Maybe lust. What else? Food, clothing. And look at the situation. What are we reading here? What's the situation for the Jews? Slavery. So he's choosing slavery rather than freedom. See, that's what a redeemer does. He chooses to join in with the slaves to deliver all of them. He doesn't choose his own comfort, his own freedom, which he could have had. He could have rocked up to Yul Brynner and said, "Yo, bro, how are things?" and made it right, and everything would have been fine. And Yul Brynner, as Pharaoh, would have been happy to have him back. And, "Oh, Moshe, where have you been? 40 years, where the heck?" He said, "Yeah, I was out on I had this thing going on in New Jersey." I mean, he could have done anything. But he came back and said, "Shalach et ami," my people, not your people. And he identified with the slaves. So he is choosing ill treatment with the people of God rather than the comforts, the luxury of Egyptian living. Freedom and all that means. So you said sexual sin, that would have been very present. Food, clothing. He would have had abundance of all that, food and clothing, right? He would have had plenty of everything. He was an Egyptian, for goodness sakes. He was a Pharaoh's court Egyptian. So he rocked up to his ex-home and said, "This is not my home anymore." That's what he chose. And it's at that moment, and you miss it when you just read, "Let my people go." But when you hear, "Let my people go," the word "my" is mammoth. You just I can't tell you how important that is. And the writer of Hebrews says, he considered, verse 26, the reproach of Messiah greater riches than the treasures of Egypt. Now, why he puts the reproach of Messiah rather than the reproach of the Jewish people? Why does he do that? Moses is considering the reproach of Messiah greater riches than the treasures of Egypt. So his choice is to go with the God gang rather than the Pharaoh gang. And the God gang had a messianic hope, demonstrated in the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Joseph story, all of that. And now we pick it up again with Moses. So Moses is considering the reproach of Messiah, that is, the pain and suffering that Messiah will also endure, the pain and suffering that Joseph had to endure some hundreds of years earlier, as being, well, if that's part of the story, I'm taking that story on board. And I'm going to take the reproach of Messiah rather than the comforts, the pleasures, the treasures of Egypt. What Hebrews is saying is that Moses is leading the people through the good choice to identify with the slaves and to be a redeemer for them, which is what the Messiah will do as well. So he's calling that the reproach of Messiah, which is greater than all the treasures of Egypt. Because he, Moses, was looking to the reward. The reward for himself was greater than the reward of Egypt. The reward for the people was redemption, much greater than the slavery in Egypt. So whether it's personal or corporate, the reward is eternal redemption in Messiah. All right, let's go back to Exodus. That phrase, Shalach et ami, is massive. Let my people go, that they may celebrate. And the word celebrate, a feast, is just one word. A chogu, a chag, like one of the chagim, one of the festivals. That's what he wants. We're going to go celebrate li, to me. So he's saying, God said this whole point was to celebrate to me Bamidbar, in the wilderness. And so Pharaoh says, "Mi Yahweh." Who's this Yahweh? I don't know him. I know certain gods. In fact, I know hundreds of gods. In Egypt, they had plenty. But I don't know your Yahweh. Do you have any other names for him? Do you have a nickname? Why should I obey his voice? We say obey. It's eshma, to listen to his voice. Why should I, that is a future with an olive, why should I shema to his call? Why should I listen to his voice? Listening implies obedience in Moses' language. L'shalach et Yisrael, to send out Israel. So you're saying, I've got a new boss, a new God, This Yahweh who tells me what to do, and I'm supposed to send out his people to him out in the wilderness? Excuse me. When you see this, you know straight away that he is beginning his heart hardening, which is going to be consistent with his activity for the next several chapters. Pharaoh is a hard-hearted fellow, and he's going to, at first glimpse here, should have said, oh, wait, Yahweh, I've heard about him. He did this, that, and the other thing. Oh, or tell me about him. I'd like to know. He should have at least been concerned to hear about a new God. Contracts are funny things. Covenants are even more difficult. The Exodus account begins in chapter 1. Now there's a new Pharaoh who knew not Joseph. And it is very likely that there would have been papyri, that is, paper on which it was written, maybe even stones that had the information about Joseph and what he had done.
Yes.
But that goes into a library and not into the minds of the trained pharaohs down the road. This is hundreds of years later. It's 300 years, so it's very likely that we today might have a new prime minister who's never even imagined any contracts that Edmund Barton signed with anyone, even though it's only, 110, 115 years since that happened. And that's in Australia with media, and Australia with Google. But this is hieroglyphics, and this is tablets, and this is tucked away in the chambers in Alexandria, the academies, the libraries. It's unlikely that there would ever be any concern to pick that up again. Yeah, so there's a lot that goes on as king. When you're the king, you got a lot on your plate. So Pharaoh said, "Me Yahweh, I don't know." And besides, here it is in verse 2. And besides, not only the lo yadati et Yah, I don't know Yahweh, but gam et Yisrael, and as for Israel, lo ashaleach. I am not sending them out. I'm not doing it. So that's his first hard-hearted response. I won't learn about Yahweh, and I'm not sending out your boys. Okay? Well, they said, now, but the God of the Hebrews met with us, and if we don't do this, he's going to meet with us, pestilence or sword. So there's going to be some enactment. There's going to be some oppression on us if we don't follow along. But Pharaoh said, Moses, Aaron, I mean, he's really personal with them now. Moses, Aaron, why do you draw the people away from their work? Get back to work. You know, and I can just see this kind of, all right, next, who's next on my program, on my itinerary today? And Pharaoh said, look, we got a lot of these people, and you'd have them cease. So that same day, Pharaoh added to the work and made the task. I mean, we hate the word taskmaster as Jews because it brings up this story. You can't say the word taskmaster unless you remember Pharaoh. It comes from nagas, which means to press, to drive, to oppress, hard press, overseer, ruler, and taskmaster 6 times in the text. So now don't give them straw as you used to give them. And let it get, but the quota is going to stay the same. And what does he call them? They're lazy, which is the Hebrew word rapha, ending with a hey, not with an aleph. That matters because rapha with an aleph, rapha with an aleph means to heal. Rapha with a hey means to abandon, become discouraged, collapse, drop, fall limp, forsake, lazy. You get the negative side of it, right? So he says of the Jewish people that were lazy. That's why they say, let us go sacrifice. Now, if you really think about that, let us go and sacrifice for 3 days and come back. That doesn't sound lazy. That sounds like an operation that means we've got to get everything together, go out for a weekend camp, a retreat. We've got to sacrifice to Yahweh, because sacrifice he understood. He understood doing this kind of worship and then we'll come back. It doesn't sound like lazy at all. Well, and who does he blame for this? Who does Pharaoh? Yeah, he blames Moses and Aaron, these old guys. The taskmasters and the foremen went out. Who are the foremen? Yeah, so taskmasters are Egyptians. Foremen are the Jews who are in charge of their little subdivisions.
That's right.
And it doesn't take many taskmasters to oversee a big company of people that way. So you've got these Jewish sellouts. I mean, that's sort of the way they're looking at it. That's the way the people looked at the overseers or these foremen as Egyptian go-betweens. When you mediate with an Egyptian and they're doing bad to you, then I'm thinking my foreman is not on my side anymore. He's a sellout. So the taskmasters went out and spoke to the people and the foreman. So everybody's saying, you don't get any more straw, but none of your labor will be reduced. So the people went out and did it. They just went out and did it. Slaves don't say, do we have to do this by 6 p.m.? I mean, they just went out and did it. They've been slaves for hundreds of years. Then the taskmasters pressed them, saying, complete your work, your daily work, just as when you had straw. So you get this whipping. It sounds like a whipping that's going on. And then the foremen of the sons of Israel, whom Pharaoh's taskmasters had set over them, they were beaten and they were asked, why didn't you complete your work yesterday or today? And the foreman said, why do you deal with us in this way? I mean, we're on your team. But they weren't on the same team. So the taskmasters are now chasing down everything that looks Jewish and beating everybody. So there's a real conflict. If you're a foreman, if you're a Jewish sellout, what are you feeling? What are you thinking? I think we can rally the troops. I think there's some political overthrow we can do. I'm guessing there would be some rabble-rousers among them who'd say, I'm not into this. I mean, we used to have it pretty well. There's no straw given to your servants, and yet you keep saying to us, it's the fault of the people, but you say you're lazy, so go to work, and you'll be given no straw. The foreman, verse 19, saw that they were in trouble because they were told, you can't reduce anything. When they left Pharaoh's presence, they met Aaron and Moses, and now they're waiting for them. So they're appealing politically to these new, it's not cause to celebrate, but a cause to whinge. Great, Moses. Great, Aaron. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for increasing my work, for making me lose my political gain, for making me lose my job, for dumping on all of us an increased work. By the way, Moses, I don't see you out there working. By the way, Aaron, I don't see you. You're 83. Get out to work. Well, anyway, they were waiting. They said to Aaron, they said to Moses and Aaron, may the Lord look upon you and judge you. You have made us odious, hated, foul, a bad smell, to stink in Pharaoh's sight. So obviously a bad smell in sight doesn't make sense. But you've made us to look like we are food that's gone off. You know how that is? You open the fridge, you're going to get the hamburger meat out, and it's green.
Ew.
Yeah, there you go.
It's always green.
You get that piece of cake out, and you're so excited, you open it up, and it's got that mold on it. You say, oh.
And the worms crawling out.
Well, I don't know about worms, but that's what Moses and Aaron had made the Jewish people in Pharaoh's sight, right? And in the sight of his servants, the taskmasters, to put a sword in their hand to kill us. We were doing pretty well, thanks. Now, were they doing pretty well?
No.
No, they were slaves. But by comparison, it's much worse today. So thanks a lot, Moish. Moses asks, you know what he calls us in verse 5? I should have mentioned this. Pharaoh said, look, the people of the land are now many. Pharaoh calls us that, not Moses. You know what the Hebrew is? Am Haaretz. You know what that phrase is in modern? The Talmud applies the term Am Haaretz to uneducated Jews. Ignorant people, yeah. Deemed likely to be negligent in their observance of Torah due to their ignorance, and the term combines the meaning of rustic with those of boorish, uncivilized, and ignorant. Am Haaretz, with an ayin. Yeah, it's like saying a landsman, a paisano, a man of the land. Am Haaretz, the exact same word. In Ethiopia, what did we call them? Falashan. It's the same word. A man of the land, a landsman. Doesn't mean a patriot. We can make it mean that. But originally it meant just some guy who doesn't know anything. All he knows is farming. So let's go back to Moses. The final verses repeat the 4 indictments. What are they? Number 1, God, you are responsible for the harm of the Jewish people. I mean, you can't miss that. Moses is indicting God. He says, secondly, you failed by choosing me to deliver them. 3, Pharaoh made it worse since you involved me. And 4, you failed in delivering them. So you failed by choosing me, that's number 2. You failed yourself in delivering them, that's number 4. Moses tells God, you made a mistake in the first place. The Jews are hurting, they've been hurting for a long time. You've been nowhere to be found, then you choose me, a fairly unlikely hero, and look how things are going, from bad to worse, okay? Do you hear me? It's getting worse out there. Hear the intensity of the Hebrew. V'hatzel lo hitzalta et amecha. You didn't get it done. You didn't deliver. You didn't deliveringly deliver your people. The repetition of the verb here, deliverance, in verse 23, reminds us that Moses is really on God, about God's failure to deliver as he promised. I can understand that. If you were running a marathon, we'd call it the wall. This is a term we use in our evangelistic campaigns as well. We remind ourselves that many people, especially Jewish people, don't want to hear from us. Some will, of course. Like Laura, who first met one of our group in the UK, then passed on her details to Mark, and Mark went and visited her in the UK. Then eventually Rachel took over the contact when they lived there. Our London branch is now following up on Laura because a few weeks back she professed faith in Yeshua with Rachel when Rachel was back there. Right. This is great, but it's not the norm for most Jewish people. Most reject our message, just like we did, and most walk away. Then they blame us for any backlash against Jewish people. How often on the streets do we hear, you are racists, or you're causing problems in Jewish-Christian relationships? The Jewish News reports that the ECAJ was engaging in dialogue with churches, and then came along Jews for Jesus, and obviously hoping to prevent our deliverance ministry. Look, we can say with Moses, V'hatzel lo hitzalta et amecha, you've not delivered them, your people. They aren't my people. They're not interested in finding out what I have to say. They're your people. And if you want them, you can have them. But like always, Moses is better than we are. His heart is more tender, and we have much to learn. Moses aches for the people of God to be redeemed, to be delivered. We need that heart for the Jewish people also. We can offer, and we must offer them God's gospel. We have to reach out. We have to try. And we must pray, and we must cry at many turning away. Some in disgust, some in ignorance, some with belligerence. It's painful, to be sure. But we must pray. Listen to what the Jews said in verse 21. May the Lord look upon you and judge you, for you've made us odious in Pharaoh's sight, and in the sight of the taskmasters, to put a sword in their hand to kill us. Who knows this better than Yeshua? God took on flesh and came to earth, born in a manger, born among the Jewish people. Why did he come? To feel our pain, to suffer our sufferings. He came to die for our sins and take the punishment for them. Yeshua came to deliver the Jewish people. Yeshua, what does that mean? The name Yeshua? Salvation. Rescue. Yeshua came to rescue the Jewish people, and yet many turned away and refused his salvation. Did he complain? Did he walk away? Did he say, I refuse to help him? You want him? You save him. No, he stayed to the end, and he gave himself for us, dying on a cross in Jerusalem to pay the penalty for our sins. What love and passion is this? What a tremendous heart. He did not say, "V'hatzel lo hitzalta et amecha." He declared himself to be the door, to be the only door for all sheep to come in and find rest with the Father. He claimed to be the shepherd who would look after each of us who followed him. He claimed to be the only way, and that no one came to God except through him. Bold, triumphal, brazen, and all with one purpose, to rescue us from the power of sin and death. So what should we learn today as a result of reading this text? What lessons do we learn? Number one, we should have a heart of compassion for the lost. Number two, complaining against God's anointed usually doesn't work and only makes matters worse. Number three, when you have a situation of real pain or anxiety, you should talk to God, who's always willing to listen. Number four, Yeshua is God's answer to our woes and our pains. He died for us to rescue us from sin and death. That's what I get from tonight's lesson. From bad to worse. But with Yeshua, look, things could go from bad to worse in your life. They could. But eventually there is a better. It doesn't mean today there's going to be better, or that tomorrow is going to be better. It doesn't mean that. But there will be a better day. That's where salesmen get it and optimists get it. There's going to be some brighter day tomorrow. But now, is that true for everyone? Because for those who don't believe in Yeshua, what's their eternity look like? For them, there's nothing really better. Deterioration is happening, and it will cause a dismal conclusion. But for those who believe in Yeshua, even if this life ends in a deteriorating way, there's something better on the far side. Yeah. It's going to last a lot longer. It's going to be complete health, complete blessing. It's going to be the presence of Messiah. So there you have it. That's Exodus chapter 5.